Thank you, Raj. Good morning and thank you for joining the webinar today. Our agenda for this webinar will cover a brief introduction to Electricity North West and background to the challenges that distribution network operators are facing. I'll also touch on our innovation strategy and the work that we've been doing to date to keep our network adaptable to the changes that are coming. I'll then hand over to Simon Brook, who's our Capacity Strategy Manager, and Simon will introduce the flexible services requirement and go through the process for the expression of interest, the timeline and the next steps. So the presentation today will take around 30 minutes. We've kept 20 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. There's two ways that you can submit your questions, either written into the webinar app or if you have dialed in, you can press 01 on your phone and take part in the live Q&A at the end. So just a brief bit of background to introduce the Electricity North West business. We are the electricity distribution network operator for the North West of England, so we do what we say on the tin. We own a significant number of electricity assets, and you can see the numbers of those and value of those in the blue bar at the bottom. We're connected to around 2.4 million domestic properties and 20,000 industrial and commercial customers. And as you can see there, industrial and commercial population account for over half of the electricity that we carry in a year. So I guess just to cover the challenges that the network operators are facing, and this is challenges across the industry, not challenges that are restricted to the North West, so why we're here today really. The Climate Change Act of 2008 set out some legally binding targets for carbon reduction. Those carbon reduction targets are driving changes to the way we operate our business. The level of carbon reduction to be achieved is an 80% reduction from 1990 levels by 2050, and there were some interim targets set for 2030. Significant progress has been made to date. You can see that in 2010 the energy mix was a third gas, a third electricity and a third oil. But figures from the Committee on Climate Change show that last year actually that's moved to 30% of our energy coming from renewables, with the first non-coal day in April 2017. There was also some press yesterday in the news that you may have seen that actually that's now been 3 full days without coal achieved, and that's demonstrating that progress continues to be made, and there's definitely really been a radical overhaul in generation. But we know that there's lots more that needs to be done to facilitate the decarbonisation of heat and transport, leading to increasing demands on the electricity network. So those network operator challenges are around three key themes really, which have been widely dubbed the energy trilemma, and that's affordability, reliability and sustainability. So as we and our customers have more reliance on electricity for their heating and transport needs, we need to improve on network resilience. It's already high, but we need to push for even better network reliability. We also know that it is our role to keep improving sustainability performance, both through facilitating swift connection of low carbon technologies and also in looking for lower carbon solutions to maintenance and operation of the electricity network. We need to do all of that whilst keeping our service affordable for customers. So whilst we may have much higher demands on the network, we need to explore smart solutions to keep costs down. So we've been busy working away through our innovation strategy around 2 core objectives. Firstly, to deliver more value from the existing assets on our network today, and also to give more choice to our customers. Ofgem has done a really good job of incentivising network operators, incentivising innovation through the Network Innovation Allowance and Network Innovation Competition mechanisms. We've run a number of projects from those mechanisms across all voltage levels on our network. But these projects have been primarily network focused, looking at methods to manage our own network, from management of connected load and generation to voltage and fault management. Some of those projects also had elements of demand-side response to them. So if we look at Respond, that was a fault level management project that looked at engaging customers in providing fault level management services, and our capacity to customers was a post-fault demand-side response project. We've also now started looking at opportunities beyond the meter, so non-network based solutions. Recently we've created a big energy conversation, encouraging customers to be more energy efficient and raise the importance of energy efficiency in the Northwest. I'm now going to hand over to Simon Brook. Simon is our Capacity Strategy Manager. Simon will give further information on the flexible services requirements and expression of interest. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Cara, and good morning, everyone. I think it's been recognised for a while now that a customer's ability to be flexible is valuable to utilities companies, and that includes network operators like Electricity North West. And so customers can be paid for providing a response on request, and for network operators like Electricity North West, that response is either to reduce demand or increase generation at times of peak, so our demand on our network doesn't exceed capacity. Now, for a number of years, Electricity North West have gone to individual customers, either with generation or with demand, and asked for a demand response from those customers. And in some of the projects that Cara spoke about in the earlier slide, we've proved that actually having a demand response from customers is successful and a viable economic option instead of reinforcing assets. And those type of demand responses, or responses in general, have been now dubbed flexible services. And I guess there's an argument in the industry at the moment about what the actual name that will be. People call it flexibility. We've called it flexible services. And so it's clear to everyone, when we talk about response, we are just interested in reducing electricity usage or increasing generation, whether that comes from a demand customer, whether that comes from a generator, or whether that comes from a storage device. Okay, this graph shows the profile of a substation, or the demand profile on a substation over a 24-hour period, and you can see where the demand exceeds the substation capacity. That's highlighted in red, and that would cause us an issue as a network operator. So the next slide looks in a bit more detail about where the peak is, and we're suggesting that it is possible to provide flexible services either from storage, from demand turn down, or generation turn up from customers who are connected to our network, which will actually help us remove that peak and make sure that the demand on the network is below its capacity. Now, in the expression of interest that we issued at the beginning of April, we targeted 7 areas of our network for this winter, so that's winter 18-19 and winter next year 19-20. And those 7 areas are split 3 in Cumbria of Alston, Coniston and Easton. We have Nelson in East Lancashire, and Blackfriars Road, Cheetham Hill and Stewart Street in Salford and Manchester. Okay. Now, this table is indicating the requirements for this winter, so that's this winter only. And if I move from left to right, we've identified the network locations on the left-hand side. We've suggested these are the voltages that you would need to be connected at, so either at, so let's pick Alston at LV or HV. We've identified what our requirement is for the flexible service in megawatts, so that's the third column. And then we spend quite a bit of time in actually defining our requirements in the block of labelled availability window, which defines which months that we want them and which times of the day, and whether that's all week or particular parts of the week. And then the column right at the end provides some information about utilisation. So it gives an indication of how many times per annum in hours that we would ask to utilise a flexible service from a provider. Now, we indicated in the expression of interest that we would run this type of process every year, and what we've tried to do in this table, which is replicated from the expression of interest, is just an indication of the profile or our expectations of the profile that we need in those 7 areas between now and the end of this price control in 2023. And what I would add is, in the expression of interest, we identify through a map for each of those network locations the areas that we are looking for customers that are connected to, so they can provide that flexible service. And there is postcode information. So there's the postcode outcode, which is the first 3 or 4 letters, and then there's the sector. So we provide more information in the expression of interest that will help individuals identify whether they're either currently connected to the network or where they potentially must connect to the network. Okay, in the expression of interest, we asked for all those people who are interested in responding to provide information to us. And this table is just replicated from the questionnaire, which can be found on our website. And really what it's trying to do is make sure that you provide information to us so that you allow us to assess your capability. So let me pick out a few key points. So the first row is asking for information about the MPAN if you are connected to the network. Rows 2A and 2B are helping you differentiate whether you're an aggregator, so therefore you're providing a number of resources collectively to provide an aggregated response, or 2B is about whether the individual, and there are some requirements about the size of the portfolio and the minimum size that we would expect from customers who are willing to provide a flexible service for us. And then I'll just pull out row 6. So if you are a generator that is connected to our network, you need to be able to confirm to us that you've got the right contractual rights to export onto our network. So just moving over to the more operational type information, what we've done in the questionnaire is try and ask you to provide more operational information about the capability of your asset. Now these are quite generic but cover all the opportunities that a generator and a demand customer and the storage. So we're looking for responses in the questionnaire around these areas. I won't go into any of them in any great detail. If you've completed questionnaires like this previously, all of these should be fairly standard for you to be able to fill in. Okay, the timeline is we started in March or so preparing the expression of interest, and we intend to finish in November this year by contracting to deliver a flexible service over this winter period. These are outlined time periods at the moment. We're on track through the expression of interest part of it, but there may be some flexibility between now and November, just depending on other things that come to play within the business. What I would add is this is our first run through this process. It is our expectation that we will run this as an annual process every year, at least up until the end of this price control, which finishes in March 2023. But we will review each part of the process as we go through it this year, and we'll make tweaks if we need to for next year's process. So I'm just going to hand you over to Cara, who's going to summarise and then lead us into the next session, which is the Q&A.
Thank you, Simon. So just to recap on the challenges in our strategy, the Climate Change Act of 2008 committing us to legally binding targets, that in turn will lead to significant increases in demand for electricity as policy encourages the transition to electric heat and electric vehicles, electric transport. Our innovation strategy, which you will find on our website, is to maximise use of existing assets and give customers more choice. We've run a number of innovation projects exploring these solutions for network operation, and this has included some projects covering flexibility provided by customers, which, as Simon said, has demonstrated that flexibility is a successful technique for managing network constraints. Simon's explained that we've got 7 areas of the network. We are looking for flexibility from demand, storage or generation assets in return for a financial incentive, and that flexibility is so that we can reduce peak demand. We are calling this requirement flexible services. There's a live expression of interest to participate in this requirement. You'll find all the material for that on the website. This process closes on the 29th of May this year. Any resultant tender process will follow in August of this year, with a view to contracts being in place for November and covering the winter period of the requirement. We'll move on to questions and answers now, but I did want to just invite any organisation who would also like a one-to-one briefing to get in touch with us. The contact details are on the slides that you can see on the screen now. Thank you for your time. Simon and Brooke will rejoin us now for the Q&A session. Just to recap, you can submit your questions online or press 01 if you would like to take part.
Thank you. If you wish to ask a question, please press 01 on your telephone. If you wish to withdraw your question, you may do so by pressing 02 to cancel. There will be a brief pause while questions are being registered.
Okay, so we've got a number of questions that have arrived via the online app. I think we'll take the first one of those is from Rodney Brooke. How and when will you be reporting on your first year's experience? Simon.
Okay, thanks, Rodney. I think the honest answer is we haven't really considered yet how we would do that, but that's a great question that we will need to take into consideration when we go through this process. I suspect it will probably be towards the back end of the year when we get into the award phase that it would be useful to actually give an indication to people of the success of this process and whether we're going to learn anything, and we'll probably do it at that time. So I hope that answers your question, Rodney, and thank you for asking it.
Second question we've got is it possible to bid into this year to provide flexible services for next year? And the answer to that is yes. So further question from David Kemp. Will funding or contracts be let for more than 1 year to provide security of revenue for bidders? On this call, it is for a 2-year period, but that's a rolling, we will make those rolling contracts. Question from Ray Arrell. Sorry, we're just making it so that we can see the full question. Ray's asked, you mentioned that the flexibility services are focused around supporting substation demand management. Do you also have a need for flexible services to providing the inverse, i.e. generation turn down, demand turn up? Sorry, Ray, I can't quite see the end of that question, but I'll hand over to Simon.
So, Ray, I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, we are trying to balance the demand on the network, and we can do that in a number of ways. So we can do that with either reducing the demand on the network or turning generation up. At the moment, in this year, we have no requirement to do the inverse, which is, as you've described, which is a generation turn down or a demand turn up. That may be something that we look at in future years. So each year we go through an exercise of understanding the needs of the network, and there may be situations that arise where that inverse is a requirement that we will come to the marketplace for.
Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more questions. There's a question around the payments that we will structure for the contract. I'll hand back over to Simon, who's leading the expression of interest for this one.
So thank you for that question. The question was, what are the payments that will be made available, availability and utilisation rates in pounds? We have tried to be as flexible as possible in the expression of interests for any type of asset to provide a flexible service. So we are not specifying a price. We're not actually specifying whether it needs to be an availability or a availability and or a utilisation payment. We are quite comfortable in accepting any type of bid that an interested party wishes to put in, because it will go through the assessment process like everything else. So we're not specifying the price and we're not specifying the payment structure. We're allowing anyone who's interested to be as flexible as possible and put in what they their own requirements rather than us being particularly rigid.
Thank you, Simon. A further question about aggregation. So, portfolios of aggregated small-scale storage, principally batteries and heat pumps in your target areas, can bid for this, but do these assets need to be in place prior to a bid, or could a "we will invest in the above by a certain date" secure funding for a flexible services contract? Does the minimum of 200 kilowatt hours for aggregated portfolios relate to generation or demand or a mixture? I will hand over to Simon.
Okay, so we are interested in particularly understanding where you are in your investment cycle. So we aren't ruling out you as an individual. We'd like to understand more of what it was that you were bringing to the party and what your plans are to deliver it by. So by all means, please complete the questionnaire and provide as much information as possible, and we may follow that up with a further discussion. I need to be clear, it isn't 200 kilowatt hours, it's 200 kilowatts. Yeah? And the portfolio could easily be a mixture of generation or demand, but it's absolutely necessary that they are located in the right places. So just bear that in mind, please, when you are completing the questionnaire and sending it in. So thank you for your question.
Next question is from Christopher Proud. Are we expecting to expand the services to other sites? as Simon mentioned earlier, we are looking at undertaking flexible services expressions of interest and tenders on a rolling basis. As we go through our forecasting of demand on the network, we will find additional constraints in the network that could be resolved by flexible service provision. So the answer to that is yes. One last question, I believe. We have a question from Luis. What kind of companies would you expect to deliver aggregation services, e.g. storage? Simon?
So we're open to any type of company that can provide flexible service to us. We don't define or will limit. We're happy to accept any expressions of interest from any company that can provide our requirements in the locations that we've specified.
Okay, I believe we've just had one last question arrive, which is a follow-up question on price. Is there a price cap per megawatt hour? Then you must have some pricing guidance. If I offer a utilisation price of £1,000 per megawatt hour, that is deliverable in 1 second and has a duration of 1 hour, would that be the price area? I think this might be one to take offline and discuss in maybe one of the one-to-one sessions that we offer. So I'd invite you to resubmit that question, Phil, or give us a call.
So thank you for the question, Phil. I think we are open to any type of discussion about pricing. We haven't specified a pricing structure because what we're trying to do is understand the capability of parties as part of this expression of interest. So we've left it completely flexible for you to decide how you provide that information to us. But we will take, as Cara suggested, we can take that offline. But that was primarily for all the other participants on the line. Okay,
I think that concludes the questions. There's been none on the telephone. So I would like to thank you once again for your time in joining the webinar today. There is a short poll. There is not a short poll, apologies. So thank you once again. Would invite you to have a look at the flexibility services area of our website. We've got the slides which we will share with the participants, and they would contain the contact details as well. So again, thank you for your time and goodbye.
Thank you.
This now concludes our conference call. Thank you all for attending. You may now disconnect your lines.